Good evening. On behalf of Global Arts Live and the International Institute of New England, thank you for joining us for tonight's stream of Suitcase Stories, Part 2. I'm Maury Aronson, the Executive Director of Global Arts Live. Based in Cambridge, Massachusetts, Global Arts Live is a nonprofit organization that presents approximately 60 performances a year on stages across Greater Boston. For the past 2 years, we have partnered with the International Institute of New England to present Suitcase Stories at the Somerville Theatre. This year, we're coming to you directly from wherever you're tuning in from. We are committed to keeping our digital programming free, so those who have been hardest hit by COVID-19 can participate. But we are asking those of you who can to please donate generously. All donations that come in tonight support the International Institute of New England and help keep global arts alive. Donate now at globalartslive.org/Suitcase Stories. A very special thank you to the Abdi Consulting Group for their support of this program. And now I'm pleased to welcome Cheryl Hamilton, our host for tonight's Suitcase Stories.
Hi, Maury.
Cheryl.
Nice to see you.
Yeah, good to see you again. I'm so excited for part 2. Part 1 was just such a riveting evening of storytelling, moving, gripping, and inspiring.
Oh, we were so happy with the turnout and the support. It was really, it's great. We'd love to be in person, but this is the second. That's, we'll take this.
Yeah, on a snowy New England night, we can take this. Last time, episode 1 of Suitcase Stories 2 weeks ago, generous viewers donated $4,600, and I hope that we can outdo that tonight. Maybe we can get to $5,000 tonight. Wouldn't that be great?
Yeah. I would very much support that. And we, again, thank you to people who did donate. And if you're coming back for the second part, again, just thank you.
Yeah, again, thank you. And now we have got a great evening of storytelling ahead of us. Take it away, please, Cheryl.
Thanks, Maury. Hello again, everybody. My name is Cheryl Hamilton. I am the creator and director for Suitcase Stories at the International Institute of New England. And I'll just keep saying thank you because we're so appreciative of everyone who's supporting this program during this time. I especially want to thank the 3 tellers from the first show on November 21st. That includes Jean Apollon, Luis Cardones, and Vanna Howard. If you didn't get to see that program, though, you still can. It's on the Global Arts Live YouTube page, so you can click and watch that either after tonight's show or at your time. It was a great night of programming, but we have another great night for you tonight. And I will say, you just mentioned the snow. I'm from Maine. I love snow. I got really excited when I saw it coming down this evening, but I also very quickly after saw a friend post on Facebook a photo of nurses and other frontline workers doing COVID tests over in Revere and other places. So they are also in my thoughts tonight. We are so grateful for everybody during this time who is trying to reach out and help one another, keep us safe, keep us healthy. And that includes personally my colleagues at the International Institute of New England. We are a nonprofit organization that serves over 2,500 people each year. We do refugee resettlement and English instruction and employment and legal services. And right now it is some of the most challenging work because people are doing it remotely. We've got some people in the office again, socially distanced, but serving people with their critical needs. We're helping people fill out unemployment benefits, get food to their homes. We have people getting housing assistance, continuing education online, making sure they have the technology to do that. It is just, it's really humbling. And I'm really grateful for those who donated to make that work possible. And I'm also really excited because one of my colleagues is actually telling a story tonight. I don't want to tell you his story. I'll just say he's our employment counselor based out of Lowell. We have 3 sites. We're based in Boston, Lowell, and Manchester, New Hampshire. So you'll hear more about that when he and I chat. But he is joined by 2 wonderful storytellers as well. I consider them friends, Chandreyee Lahiri and Rosanna Salcedo. These stories were recorded in advance. However, we are going to have live conversations with each of the storytellers between. So excuse me for a second. because we're at home, we can't hear your applause. They can't hear your applause. They can't hear your ahs and oohs. So feel free to send some love in the comments, whether you're watching from Facebook or on YouTube. Tell them what the story meant to you, because for some, it is their first time telling a story at Suitcase Stories. So that is, it's a lot of excitement, but also can bring some nerves. But they did such a great job. So you can put those. Let me see if there's anything else to share with you. Oh, last time we did an announcement about how stories might be more appropriate for an older audience, but today's stories are appropriate for middle school and above, and so you feel welcome to stay. We do have some stories on suitcasestories.org, our website, that are very child-friendly as well, if you want to watch those after the program this evening. Whew, that's a lot to get through, but I'm really excited to just get straight into the storytelling. Suitcase Stories is a program we launched in 2017 to raise the profile of refugee and immigrant voices, and also just to bring us together as a community to better understand each other, meet new communities, meet new neighbors. And for me, it's been very personal. Our first storyteller is someone I did not know until she came into the audiences to see Suitcase Stories. She's a GIS specialist. She lives in Waltham with her husband and son. She is a writer, she's a storyteller, and she is a fellow producer. She is one of the people that produces a series called Voices, which raises the profile of Southeast Asian stories. It's stories told by Southeast Asian residents. So without further ado, my friend, Chandreyee Lahiri.
We have this red cassette tape in our family that is full of history. Now, my mom gave it to me about 5 or 6 years ago when I went to visit her in Kolkata, in India, which is where I'm from. And I, of course, promptly forgot about it until my husband discovered it in our basement here in Waltham, Massachusetts, where we live. Now, I didn't have a cassette tape recorder player thing handy right then, so I called my brother in England, and he responded by immediately emailing me a digital version of the tape because he had converted it years ago. He chuckled and said, "You're gonna love this." My husband was away on work, and our 6-year-old had finally gone to sleep. So I settled down with a glass of wine and hit play. And the scratchy sounds that poured out of my computer took my breath away. There was my grandmother. She was young and in India, and she was reciting a poem. When she got done, my aunt came on and sang this beautiful song. And in the background, I could hear me and my little cousins, because we must have all been very little, just creating ruckus the way little kids do. And all the voices were familiar, but they were also unfamiliar because they echoed with this youth and vitality that I couldn't remember anymore. And then the tape did this weird kind of a jump, and it was my father talking. And he was talking about Nairobi in Kenya. I will explain at this point that in 1974, we packed our suitcases and we left India in this shower of tearful goodbyes. We moved to Kenya, and it was a big move. My father, I called him Bapi. Bapi was an electrical engineer, but he was also the oldest in the family, which meant, per Indian tradition, he was the sole breadwinner and responsible for the whole extended family. And his paycheck in Kolkata, it was getting harder and harder to pay the bills. So he found this promising job opportunity in Nairobi, and he chased it. I was about 2, my older brother was about 7. And my parents they told me they felt really lucky to be able to leave a stagnant economy and to be able to strike out for a better future, but they were also utterly sad. When people think about the immigrant story, they think about new experiences and opportunities, but it's also a story of sunderings, of fractured communities and families that are torn apart. And my mom and Bapi, they tried to bridge this chasm, this fracture, through thick handwritten letters full of news. And they really wanted to hear people's voices, but phone calls were really expensive. Until the day inspiration struck and my dad slipped this little red cassette tape that had AGFA written on it. He slipped it into the tape recorder. Back in America in the 2000s, I listened in fascination as my father started telling these stories of our new immigrant life in Nairobi. He was describing these safaris we went on on the weekends to see the wild animals. For his mother, he described drive-in movie theaters, which they didn't have in India. For his father, he got all excited about the East African car rally that the two of them used to watch on the news in India, but Bobby was going to get to go to one. He talked about settling in his new job, and I felt the need to hit the pause button and take a breath. Bobby had died about 30 years ago now, and not a day goes by when I don't think about him. And that day I just felt myself feeling such regret, because here he was describing his immigrant adventures to his father, but he didn't live to see mine or hear about mine. And to hear his strong young voice speaking to me from the past like that, it was thrilling, but it was also kind of unnerving. But then that's why God made wine. So I poured myself a refill and I made myself press play again. And this was great. Now my father was talking to people in his family as if they were in the room with him. He was talking to his mother-in-law about the reading glasses that she got and she wrote about. He talked to his father-in-law about colleagues they had in common because they worked in the same company at one point. And as I was listening to all this picture started forming in my mind of what his relationships were with all these people in my life, but also what life was like for an immigrant family in a strange new country in that time. It was wonderful. And then the tape did another one of those little jumps, and now it was my mom and my aunt in India chit-chatting. And they were in the middle of this conversation about how they named us kids or something. And in the middle of a sentence, the tape did another jump. But this time, there was a raspy little voice singing happy birthday. It was me. I was 2 years old or so, and Mom tells me that I was sitting right in Bobby's lap, all cuddled up, while the poor man tried desperately to coax any kind of coherent conversation out of me. And it was a disaster, but really it was a comedy of errors. I think Bobby had obviously overestimated what a toddler understands about recording, and he was asking me all these questions to get me to talk for the family, and I didn't get it at all. All the questions he asked me, I turned around and I asked the tape recorder. At one point, I ignored him and I started up a conversation with the tape recorder. Hey, how are you? What's your name? I asked it to sing for me. You could hear him giggling in the background, and at one point he just kind of gave up on getting me to talk, I think, and he said, how about a song? That was a good idea. I belted out a song at the top of my lungs, and it went really well. He even got me to cooperate with him and say goodbye in Swahili, which is kwaheri. But the next day, I called my mom in Kolkata because I wanted to know why that tape kept jumping back and forth like that in time between the past and the present, between India and Africa. And Ma told me that they had to send every spare shilling back home to the family, and one of the ways that they cut costs is to reuse the tape. So basically, they took the tape, recorded their message, mailed it to India, and our family in India would listen to the message, record their reply on top of the tape, and mail it back to us. And this tape went back and forth, just, it really was an archaeological dig. Like as you went down the tape, you found fragments of conversations from different times and different places. It was a goldmine for me. It was wonderful, but somehow what my mom said transformed the recording in some way for me, and I felt compelled to listen to it. Knowing what I did, I listened to it right from the beginning, and I found myself picking up on some very different facts from the first time I heard it. For instance, my dad talked to his dad about this scratch that he got in the car door and how hard it was because he had to pay this really big insurance premium. He hadn't been able to get the scratch fixed. The first time I heard the tape, all I heard was, "Yay, I have a new car." I didn't hear how hard it was for him to afford it. Similarly, there was one point where he was really excited about the car rally, and he was telling his dad about this new book that he had bought that he loved, and he was going to bring it back for his dad. But then he goes on to apologize for not being able to buy the book that his dad really wanted to read because he couldn't afford it. And there were tidbits like this casually tucked into all sorts of different really positive stories. And I found myself wondering, what else had they not talked about? What other struggles and hardship had they minimized or left off the tape? I knew about some of the things. I've heard stories about how my mom had to wash her saris, those 6-9 yard long cotton saris, in the bathtub by hand because they couldn't afford the washing machine that all the other expats had because they were saving up to send money home. My dad working overtime in the middle of the night, even though he wasn't well or when it was dangerous to be out. And of course, I remembered this terrible Tupperware that Ma still has in Calcutta. It's cracked and yellow and broken, and she won't get rid of it because back in the day, it took her 6 months to save the 25 cents that it cost. And to her, it was priceless. Anyway, when they talked to us about these stories, it was never about any of this. It was all adventures and adrenaline highs and the heady days of yore. And that made me realize that this too was the immigrant story, harvesting the highs out of what must be like a swirling mass of stress and struggle. Because when you leave your family and home and everything you know, you're braced and expecting anything. You're ready for the worst, and you're ready to make the best of things. You're ready to shelf your sense of entitlement just a little bit and put your head down and craft that new future. I mean, I know I've walked this journey myself here in the US, and my brother has too. He's an immigrant he immigrated to England. But I felt like it was easier for us. Maybe times were different, easier. But maybe also my parents had shown us the path. They had shown us what hard work meant. They had shown us the meaning of my father's favorite phrase, which was, "keep smiling." And I wonder if I would have realized it in the gut the way I did if it wasn't for that tape that helped me look past the shining, smiley faces that are trapped in albums that tend to tell every family's history. And now I'm going to say what my father had to work really hard to get me to say 36 years ago. Kwaheri.
দু তিনজন ফ্যামিলি মিলে যায়, 2-3টে গাড়ি একসাথে পার্ক করে গল্প করতে করতে বেশিরভাগ খাওয়া দাওয়াই বেশি হয়, আড্ডা হয়, আর বেশ একটা আউটিং মতন হয় সন্ধ্যেবেলাটা। তো সেই করে সিনেমা দেখছি খুব, বলতে ভালো। কিন্তু স্কুলে তুমি ইংরেজিতে কথা বলতে পারো? হ্যাঁ। বলো তো, হোয়াটস ইওর নেম বুড়ি?
ডক্টর।
হ্যাঁ,
ডক্টর।
বলো, মাই নেম ইজ Chandreyee Lahiri। বলো,
Chandreyee Lahiri, my name.
Are you a good girl?
Yeah.
Are you a very good girl?
Yeah.
বলো,
কোহারি।
বলো, সবাইকে বলছি কোহারি।
সবাইকে বলছি আমি কোহারি।
টাটা বাই বাই।
টাটা বাই বাই। কোহারি।
Chandreyee. There's a lot of people at home going, "Oh my God, that's so sweet."
Thank you.
Thank you
It's
so
very ridiculous.
It is a treasure, like you said. It is a treasure. I know you have it. You have to show everybody. Let's see the tape. I mean, amazing. Are you keeping that like in a safety vault somewhere?
I should, but I want to show you. This is what's inside it. And I don't know if you can read. It says message from the Lahiris.
Mhm.
And then inside here, this is my Bapi's handwriting. Message from Calcutta.
Oh, that's amazing. Amazing.
Yeah, thank you. This was wonderful to hear it like this.
Well, I was just joking, actually. My husband and I were just discussing that we have too much, literally just like this evening, I'm like, we have too much Tupperware. Where do we put it? And I will never think about Tupperware the same after your story. It's just so hard. It's such a poignant moment in that piece. It's so much of it. So I'm curious, like, how are you capturing the stories of your life now for the next generation? Do you feel more responsibility to, or?
That's a great question. So when my son was little, and he was utterly entertaining the way all little kids are, he had the misfortune that I started blogging. So a lot of his childhood I have captured in blogs, and then when he was very little, all the videos and photographs. And in fact, I don't know if I told you the story of the tornado warning here.
I don't think so.
So I went to grad school in Cincinnati, where we would have tornado warnings all the time. And I'd taken to keeping my most important possessions next to my bed, which at that time included my visa, my passport, my bank card. But all these years later, now I'm a citizen, we had a tornado warning in Waltham. And when I found myself running down to the basement in Cincinnati, I would grab those important documents. Here, all I grabbed was the little external drive with all my son's videos and photographs. That's what felt important. Well, I grabbed the kid too, because, might as well hold on to him. But yeah.
And the husband.
Yeah.
It's sweet. We always start our workshops when we do a thing called Suitcase Stories Unpacked, where we teach the art of storytelling through migration. And we always start with an exercise. It's like, what would you put in your suitcase if you could only bring one thing? And so many middle school and high school kids are like, my iPhone or my cell, And when I ask them why, they say, well, it's where my photos are. It's how I reach my friends. It's not about the apps, right? It's really about connection. So you and I talked about how one of my someone who inspired me was my grandfather. He traveled around the world when he was 18, and he sent letters back, but he actually was able to film it on one of the earliest film cameras. So my brother, a historian, has this treasure trove, and we've got images of like Mussolini's army marching through Rome. We've got him walking on the pyramids on a date with a woman with a parasol. And it was the same feeling. It was like overwhelming to just like discover this. But you also, you began as a writer, but then you got into storytelling. What has it offered you that's different than your writing?
That's a great question too. I think one of the things is reaching people with my own voice, which always makes it so much more personal. When I used to write my blog, it had a similar effect, but I think for people to hear it in my voice and to see my face hits personally, makes something seem real in a way that maybe it wouldn't have. So I really appreciate storytelling. Every time I've managed to do it publicly, I've had people respond to me, maybe realize things that they didn't completely know about, or sometimes the story just resonates because, everyone's got the same story. We all, at the essence, we're all living the same lives and having very similar experiences. But
right.
Yeah.
Again, if you are enjoying Chandreee's story and you want to make a comment in any of the YouTube comments or Facebook about, what you did connect with, I'm sure you'd love to read it. I know also, you have an 8-minute story, right? 9-minute story, and you couldn't put all the stories from that tape that you wanted to say. What is something that you wish you could have included that you weren't able to?
Oh, so many things, but I'll tell you the one that I think I'd like to share is right towards the end of that very funny video of my Comedy of Errors conversation. The funniest part. So my brother has actually named the digital file for this audio. It's called Makidaki, because what happened is there was that part when Bapi was saying, "Are you a good girl?" And I was like, "Yes, I am." He was trying to get me to sing and I wasn't cooperating. And so at one point he got frustrated and he said, "You're a bad girl." And I didn't like it. And so I dropped my voice on the tape and I say, "Maki Daki," in a very threatening way. And what that means in Bengali is, "Do you want me to get ma?" And it was a threat. I was going to set my mom on him. And Bobby giggles and goes, well, what is it that you think your mom's going to do? And I tell him, she's going to cut you with a knife. And he kind of gets, it all goes downhill from there. He's like, what did you say? And then tears happen and whatever. But I talked to my mom to say, what was that about?
Right.
I said, what's a 2-year-old? Please explain.
Yeah.
And sorry, we were saying?
No, keep going.
Yeah. So she was saying that apparently there was a spate of violence at that time in Nairobi. And when my dad had to go out in the middle of the night to fix faults out in the countryside in the dark, he had started carrying a machete. I think they called it a punga or something under his car seat. Nobody cut anybody with a knife as far as anybody in my family knew, but little ears had picked it up. So we laugh about how kids have such big ears. They interpret reality in a different way. But my family is eternally amused that I was sitting in my dad's lap, all of 2, and threatening to hurt him with a knife. I mean, the sheer gall.
Yeah, I got to hear a few more of the takes, and it was really wonderful. But I had to play the one where you say your own name, because I mean, it's arresting in the best way possible. So I wish we could talk more. I hope that people follow you in your blog. I hope people discover Voices. It's an amazing program, and you do a lot of work to make that possible. And you're just a fantastic storyteller. So thank you.
Thank you for having me, Cheryl. Thank you.
You're welcome. Have a great night. So our next storyteller is another woman that does a lot of storytelling around the greater New England area, but actually came to storytelling through Suitcase Stories. She first told a story at the Cambridge School of Weston, where she's the Dean of Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion. And she told a story. It's a different story than the one she's telling tonight, but I hope you discover it and we can share that with you. But she is an educator, she is an artist, she's a writer, and proudly now a storyteller. Miss Rosanna Salcedo.
I'm on the last leg of the journey, driving on a circuitous road up the mountain from which there are breathtaking views of mountains and hills. I'm on my way to a writing residency. I found this place where clouds cast shadows over green blanketed hills for as far as the eyes can see in the Blue Ridge Mountains of North Carolina. Deep in the mountains, there is a place that supports artists for 2 weeks at a time in comfortable cabins, surrounded by forest, from which you can hike to cascading waterfalls and peaceful meadows. I see the stone wall that signals I've reached the entrance to the property. I turn onto the gravel road that is lined for many yards with rhododendron with large pink blossoms, and it is a lovely welcome. I make my way to the main building and meet Tim, the caretaker, who I've spoken to before on the phone. Before taking me to my cabin, he wants to show me around the property. On the compound, there are a number of residential style buildings that house groups of artists and writers who are partaking in conferences and workshops. I'm not part of any of those groups, but Tim explains that if I want to take my meals in the dining hall, I can do so with the others. My cabin is spacious and modern with a full kitchen and all the furniture I need. There are a couple of cabins nearby, but I can't see them through the trees. It is peaceful and beautiful and all mine for 2 weeks. Summer days are long, and I have time to walk back to my cabin after dinner before it gets dark. On one of the first days, as I'm walking back, I see that one of the other cabin dwellers is moving in, and I decide to introduce myself. Alicia? Oh my God, Rosanna, what are you doing here? It's a crazy coincidence. Alicia is one of my colleagues, a teacher at the school where I work. She's not someone I know well, but someone with whom I'm friendly. I like her. There's something creative and earthy about her that I can relate to. Over the next couple of weeks, we get to know each other better. Every night, as we walk back to our cabins after dinner, we talk about our writing, our families. She shows me pictures of her sketches, and I show her pictures of my oil paintings. We both have a quirky fascination for astrology. And as it turns out, we're both born under the astrological sign of Pisces, and now I'm beginning to think we're soul sisters. In the second week of the writing residency, Alicia invites me to a farewell party at the compound. See, Alicia and some of the other participants have been coming to the mountain for years. They're a part of a writers' consortium. The regulars who visit every year They plan the farewell party to end the program. They plan it for a year, and there's always a theme. It's a Mexican theme party, says Alicia. I'm immediately suspicious because as far as I can tell, based on who shows up for dinner every night, I'm the only Latinx person on this property. In fact, I'm the only person of color. She continues, yeah, we've been planning it all year and working on our costumes. Costumes. She must see what I'm thinking and feeling, because then she continues guiltily, yeah, I know it's not politically correct. I can imagine what some people will show up as. Then her mood shifts again and she says, but it's just for fun. I'm going as Frida Kahlo, and there's going to be a mariachi. Just to be clear, Alicia knows I'm Latina. We have spoken for hours about my writing project, a memoir about my grandmother, my mother, and me, a story about my mother's journey to the United States from the Dominican Republic, about how she dropped out of school because there were no ESL classes at her high school. And she ended up having to work at a sweatshop at age 16 with my grandmother, a story about my own struggles as a first-generation Latina in college. Is she really inviting me to a Mexican theme party? Back in my cabin, I paced the floors. I came to the mountain for inspiration, to write a story, something beautiful, hopefully something impactful among artists. And yet these artists, these grown adults, professional people from across the United States are planning to have a party that may be completely dehumanizing to me. I was disappointed and felt betrayed by these so-called artists. I felt betrayed by Alicia. She could speak to the organizers, but they've been coming here for years. This is their place and their space. I'm the outsider. I don't think she'll spoil their fun. In the heart of the mountain, under the canopy of the trees, they will have their party, and no one will see them. I decide that I will attend the party, and I will bear witness. I show up as myself, expecting the worst, but hoping it won't be too bad. And it is beyond bad. When Alicia said there would be a mariachi, for a moment I thought maybe they did hire a real mariachi band and to play real Mexican music. The mariachi turns out to be 3 white men in fake mustaches wearing sombreros and ponchos, playing poor renditions of songs in Spanish. By this I mean, they do not speak Spanish. They do not bother to learn the words and pronounce them correctly. They fa la la most of the lyrics. The songs are not even Mexican songs. They attempt to sing Guantanamera, Guajira Guantanamera, except it doesn't sound like that at all. Guantanamera is a song written by a Cuban songwriter. It includes lyrics from a poem by José Martí, Cuban founding father and liberator in the late 19th century. It's like a Cuban national anthem. They also intentionally fumble their way through Feliz Navidad, Prospero año y felicidad, a Christmas favorite across Latin America, written and performed by José Feliciano, a Puerto Rican songwriter. A musical prodigy, born blind with congenital glaucoma, who starts playing music at the age of 3 and starts performing publicly in New York City at the age of 9. He's also a Puerto Rican national treasure. They also sing the Pee Wee Herman theme song, that thing that it doesn't even have lyrics. It goes la 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 la. I don't even know where that's from. So not only is there no sense of what constitutes Mexican culture, all things Latinx are lumped together, even though there are over 30 Latin American countries and countless cultures within them. I look around and there are drunken men pretending to be drunken Mexicans, drinking beer bottles out of paper bags, over-sexualized women in flouncy blouses with flowers in their hair who introduce themselves as Margarita and Rosita, cholo gangsters, soccer players, at least a dozen Day of the Dead skulls, and Frida, penciled in unibrow Frida, who is carrying with her a stuffed purple octopus, who she introduces as her lover, Diego Rivera. As I look around, there are participants playing out skits, playing out every stereotype of a Latino, and drinking copious amounts of alcohol. Having seen enough, I decide to take my leave when an inebriated white man stops me and asks why I am not dressed for the occasion. You know, he says, you could pass for a Mexican. The next day, I pack my car and quietly leave the mountain. When I return to school in September, I avoid Alicia for a long time, so much so that I don't even realize she's taking a year-long leave of absence from school to travel to Italy to continue to work on her novel. I envy her privilege. What would I write about if I could take a whole year off from work? What would I write about if I could travel to a far-off place to write what was in my soul, instead of writing about the summer I was invited to a Mexican theme party?
Hi, Rosanna.
Hi, Cheryl.
Thank you so much for that story and those beautiful images. I was just looking at the flower thinking that gives me peace. Before we get into your story though, can you say something? I mean, you are a Dean of Equity, Diversity, Equity, Inclusion. You've got the writing, you've got the storytelling, the artist. What do those different genres give you, versus writing versus painting?
Oh my goodness. Well, the painting I discovered later in life, as an adult. I always liked art, but I never really practiced it. And then, I had a crisis in my life. And as a result of that crisis, I started painting, and this amazing art came out of me. So I'm not a trained artist. But I have never stopped since I started. And I've always journaled, and the journal, turned into other types of writing, personal essays. And the painting is also a little bit like journaling. Pablo Picasso once said that, painting is kind of like journaling as well. So it's all, creative expression for me is a way for me to process my feelings. It's a cathartic process, very important for my well-being. I need to remind myself to always make time for it. And lately I've been thinking about how do I combine my creative expression with my DEI work? How can I bring those two things together more?
Well, you're clearly doing it tonight, so you're already well on your way. It's actually interesting. That's how I got into storytelling. It was also out of a personal crisis. It's also the origins of Suitcase Stories. Suitcase Stories was launched after the previous presidential election, when there was a lot of negative rhetoric and attacks aimed at immigrants. And really, we just wanted to give some joy back to people, and also some, personal connection as neighbors, and trying to find really what the humanity is in all of us. So thank you for being one of those people that made that possible. I also know, though, you've done 2 stories now, which is wonderful. We've had other Suitcase Stories return with different stories because we have many. But you were sort of anxious about sharing this particular piece. Why was that?
I was, because my 2 previous stories were such feel-good stories, when the audience, they were moving, and sometimes there were tears, but it was
lots of tears,
but they left the audience feeling good about themselves, I think. Yep. And I thought, I was like, this story is a little different. This story might make people feel uncomfortable. And that's, I think, a risk I'm willing to take more and more, because I think that, like I said, I want to bring more of the DEI work into my storytelling. And, these stories can trigger empathy in a way that other types of workshops and presentations sometimes don't. So if I can do that, if I can trigger somebody's empathy and help them have a shift in heart, that's something I want to do.
Well, I told you actually that your story challenged me even, and we talked about this a little bit, and I've really been thinking a lot about it since I first had the privilege of reading it. And I think I've worked out where I've landed. So I'll be a little vulnerable. And I said to you that obviously when you get to the party, all that egregious behavior, I am 100% with you saying that is, terrible. But as someone who grew up in Maine, in a predominantly all-white community, who knew that there might have been Mexicans in Maine, but I didn't have connection, and often they were seasonal workers. When I first started the story, I thought, wait a second, maybe I had a Mexican party. Like I literally had a panic. And I'm thinking, well, okay, so are we able to have nationality-based parties? Is that possible? So for example, if I'm someone, I don't know, I turn on National Geographic, right? And I hear about a country and I feel like, oh, that sounds like an interesting place. And I go back and I start cooking, I find some recipes to learn, or maybe I find an actual artist from that country rather than someone from another country. Where's the line? Or is the line that there should be no nationality parties?
I mean, there's a difference between cultural appropriation and cultural appreciation, and I think to be curious about other people's culture is healthy and good and should be encouraged. You should feel curious about other people's cultures and you should want to learn. And so listening to other people's music and, tasting other people's food is absolutely, the right thing to do. And also making friends with people from other cultures, right? Like the best way to understand another culture is by having that relationship. And so it's hard sometimes if you live in a community that isn't diverse, but that's also a reason why people should consider, if they have an opportunity to live somewhere, like make the choice to live in a diverse community so that you actually have those opportunities for proximity with other cultures. That is the only way that you're truly going to learn in an authentic, genuine way what other cultures are like. What we see through the media and what we're taught oftentimes are stereotypes.
Yeah. And I loved how we talked about, you said, ask yourself, if you have not been to a party hosted by Puerto Ricans or hosted by people from Nigeria or Mexico, right? Like ask yourself why. Can you say more about that? Because I thought that was really helpful for me to reflect on as well.
Yeah, I mean, I think there are lots of well-intentioned people who believe they are, socially conscious and they're well-intended. But when, if I ask them, like, who are your Facebook friends? How diverse are your group of Facebook friends? When was the last time that you were invited to a cultural celebration from, by someone from a different culture? If you haven't been invited, you should ask yourself the question, why, right? Why do you not have a more diverse circle of friends? Or, why are you not trying to reach out to your colleagues at work and befriending your colleagues who might be from a different culture? It's work that we should do as individuals, and it behooves us all to want to get to know other cultures and other people.
Yeah, I mean, it's about action, right? A lot of people are like, why isn't there more diversity in our circles? It's like, well, have you gone to other people's events? Have you been present at others? So absolutely. You mentioned Facebook. I say this often. My favorite thing when we have live shows, but actually even virtual, is that 6 strangers show up and then 6 strangers become Facebook friends by the end of the night because they all told a story. So I really appreciate that. I would love to talk to you for longer, but I think it's a beautiful piece. I know people are saying wonderful comments in the YouTube chat. And I just hope you keep telling these kinds of stories. And really, you gave me a lot to think about, and I'm very grateful for that, Rosanna.
Well, thank you for the opportunity, Cheryl. I love doing this.
All right. Well, speaking of connecting with your colleagues, the last person is my colleague, and I have so much admiration and respect for him, just as a person, and also the important work he does at the Institute. So as a reminder, any donations made tonight go to support the critical work that the International Institute New England is doing on behalf of immigrants and refugees in our area. Funds also are shared with our host, Global Arts Live, who is bringing entertainment and education to us all, and very much needed right now as we're socially distanced. So if you have the capacity, we would be very grateful if you could make a gift. Again, it's at the bottom of the screen. You go to globalartslive.org/suitcase stories. But our last teller, again, I can't even give you any of his story or any of the introduction because I'd be giving away what he's about to share. But from Lowell, Massachusetts, Yusif Abdi.
So I went to a friend's party with my family, and the friend had kids, and informed to my daughter that they have a grandparents, those who were at the party, and that on our way, my daughter asked me about where is her grandmother and grandfather. I immediately told her that her grandmother lives in Africa, Uganda, and I couldn't able immediately to let her know about her grandfather because she's only 5 years old. I told her that after moment of silence and driving, I told her that her grandfather is in paradise, and she said, asking me, "Can we go and so we can see the grandfather?" Then I told her. People go to the paradise when they get older. So, and I immediately switched the conversation. My dad was killed, and because of his political, and I was targeted, and I have to leave Somalia, and I was 20 years old at that time. When I get to Pakistan, I wasn't assured as to be a citizen of that country, or the option of going back to Somalia wasn't right option. I was assured as a refugee in Pakistan, which I lived for 4.5 years. During that period, my life over there, I was living alone, and but a year later, I was able to contact my mom and siblings. It wasn't a long call; it was a short call. Through a friend, I was able to get a confirmation they are doing well. Then I was resettled in the United States. I was very lucky. In 2008. As I am arriving to United States, I was 26 years old. I was arriving with other refugees, some from Nepal, from Iraq, from Somalia, Liberia. After our paperwork has been completed, a woman with the uniform directs us toward our next destination, Gateway. On our way, each was sharing their destination. Some were saying we're going to Chicago or Detroit and Columbus. On my way to the aisle to my departure, met with a gentleman. I said to him, "Good luck in Columbus." I didn't know. I knew I'm going to Burlington, Vermont, but I didn't know how Vermont would look like. But when I looked the window, I saw a small plane, and I was wondering what Vermont will be. Arriving to Burlington, Vermont, I was welcomed with a case manager who also speaks Somali. It's great to see someone who speaks your language, but even though I speak English, on the way when observing the beauty of Vermont, I was overwhelmed. The landscape view, it's a place which I never been in my life. It wasn't where I came from, which was more distraction during my time. During that period of my transition to the United States, my mother and young siblings were on the move, and they were living in a village to protect themselves and escaping. During that period was when the heaviest conflict was happening. Prior to the arrival of the United States, every refugee goes through consecutive orientations. In the orientation, they will get to know the U.S. culture, rules and regulations, and most important, employment. As I am coming, my caseworker reminded me again, was saying that employment is very high priority, and also finding a job should be my first priority. After my social security and my work documents cleared out, I was very lucky. I had a roommate who suggested me a temporary job at a company that makes military eyewear. Few days later, I landed that job, working with 5 people, assembling those pieces. It's ironic making a military product while I fled from a war. I liked that job because I was surrounded with the people who had a refugee background, but it was seasonal. Later, I got another job that makes cookie dough for Ben & Jerry ice cream. I have to test each cookie dough. That's the part I like about it. All these jobs were hard because I have to walk at night, walk in ice, sideways, in snow banks, sometimes coming back home, sorting and walking like old man, even though I was 26 years old. It was okay to me because it was better, my life in conflict in Somalia, also my refugee life in Pakistan. I started the process to reunited with them, but I knew it's gonna take some time. But I always had the positive that one day we will reconnect it or will reunite it. I never thought the process will take longer than 10 years. But in beginning of 2008, I received a notification that my mom's file will start. During the process, there was a lot of interviews, a lot of paperwork. There was a lot of money for filing. During one of her interviews, she was asked if she has any proof that a picture that any recent picture that my mom and me together. So when she left Somalia, she didn't had an opportunity to get all the pictures, and also there was any snap pictures that you can take it. So it wasn't easy. So luckily we were able to do DNA that expedited the process. In beginning of January 2020, we received the notification of my mother's visa acceptance. I couldn't believe it. I asked my brother to look the email and notification. He said it's correct. So my mother is old, and also due to her paperwork, she cannot easily travel. Then we decided to accompany her. So I have to go to Uganda, and this was the first departure since I came to the United States, going to Africa. As I am arriving in Uganda first time, meeting with my mom and siblings was very heart-touching. We haven't seen each other for 17 years. We were all emotional. We only talked about the present. We haven't talked about the past, which was very painful to us. As I am staying in Uganda, I was getting alerts and news that the flights are shutting down and borders are going to close because of the pandemic. I felt very worried because I felt sometimes if I am going back to home. On Saturday, as I am coming to the airport, it's so crowded. Everyone trying to get the airplane, get the flight, flew wherever they're going. I felt during that period unsecure. Till I get to the aisle to our flight. That's when I felt I would make it back to home. When we finally landed in Boston, we were the only airplane that arrived in Lowell International Airport. And the airport was so empty. The last time I met with my mother was in her house. Now I'm inviting her in my house. She's meeting with my wife, my son, and finally my daughter was able to meet with her grandmother.
Yusif.
Hi, Cheryl. I become speechless
I
as I am watching.
was going to say that's hard for me to be speechless, but I am a sucker for reunions, and I know that there's a couple people with probably eyes like I have. I am so glad you and your mother are back together, and I know the entire staff was incredibly grateful when you made it back from Uganda. We were on pins and needles about whether you'd make it, and what a pandemic story, right?
Yeah.
I want to say one thing. You're trying to do 17 years in 8 minutes. It's impossible. But there's one thing that I will remember besides the cookie dough, which, by the way, I think we should all go get cookie dough in your honor. But I think I'm thinking about it a lot right now because we are all using technology to stay connected. But you told me when you were talking about this story that like you had to give up phone calls. You stopped making phone calls to your family because it was too expensive and you wanted to send money so they could have food. Can you say a little bit more about that?
Yeah. So being by yourself all the time, you always want to connect to your mom, which you know that you left her at her 40s alone. And as I am the oldest of my family, I had a responsibility for my siblings and my mother as well. Also, I was always worrying about her because she is not in a safe place, and she's always moving in a male-dominant place.
Mm-hmm. And you
So all the time, for her to hear my voice that I'm doing well, and vice versa, that to hear her voice and my siblings, usually it was a luxury. But I have to debate. Do I spend at that time? A phone call wasn't easy. Shall I spend money on talking to her, or I should send that money so they can be in a better situated? So they have to have they could have some. Yeah.
And you said, to give perspective to our viewers who haven't known this, when you were in Pakistan, a call, you could only talk for like 7 or 8 minutes because that was very expensive. That is shorter than the story we just heard. And then you told me when you were in Burlington, a phone call would be about $30.
Yes.
But you would sacrifice that phone call in order to spend $30 for food for them. And I just think that those are the things that really, for me, storytelling makes us tangibly understand what it means to live the life of someone who's a refugee. But I know people are also on pins and needles. How is your mother? She's been in the country less than a year and during a pandemic. Like, how is she doing?
She's doing well. She is in her 60s. She's not old, but she is regaining her life. I felt meeting with her at the first time that someone you lost and back to the life, and we didn't have a luxury of saying bye to each other, but now we were able to meet. And she feels secure in Lowell. She feels safe. She is spending a time with her grandchildren, and they are a lot of questions, but they are on the way to bridge about their communication. She's teaching them Somali, and they're teaching her English.
That's so awesome. And we were joking. I mean, like, it's not why she came, but you said because you are working like at home, having your mother there to help with the kids during remote work. I mean, it's just crazy. It's so wonderful. And I heard she's even going to take English classes with us at the International Institute. I mean, it's just full circle, the whole thing. But can you talk about your work a little bit? I mean, refugee employment is hard work in any situation. But tell us what happened beginning in March, and what has your work looked like lately? Because we know that many immigrants and refugees and others have been laid off during the pandemic.
Yeah, in the norms of my work is helping clients to get a first placement, help them to their skills training after they finish their skills training, help them to job upgrades. If they lose their jobs, they come back and restructure them and support them to go back to the work. So when the pandemic hit, it was a storm, heavy storm hit, and I was getting a calls that some of my clients are saying that they get laid off. Companies are calling saying they're going to lay off clients. It was unimaginary during that period, but we were able to support with the to restructure or become a more secure. Helped almost more than 50 unemployment application, more than 200 weekly filing. At the same time, I was getting a call from employers that makes medical products, and they were saying that they needed urgent support. I was able to place them in a few days, and some of them while I was calling them to check in how they're doing, and I was hearing from them that they were less fear and more hopeful.
Yeah. I mean, I think when I think about our clients, they're at both ends of the continuum, right? We have people who are the most vulnerable being laid off because companies are closing. And we also have people on the front lines doing the essential work. They're in the hospitals, they're in the nursing homes, they're in the grocery stores. And so they're either calling us because they're concerned or afraid. We've had clients who have gotten COVID. I mentioned before, the first 3 people I knew that contracted COVID were suitcase storytellers. And that was a really, as you can imagine, a very emotional moment. But also, again, our staff, social work is not meant to be done over Zoom from home, but people are doing it. I mean, you're doing it every day. Do you have any clients recently you've been thinking about?
Yeah, so all my clients are very thankful, and always when I help them with the employment, they are ironically saying thank you, and seeing them successing, that always what pushed me to do my job.
Yeah, and you said that's actually how you got into refugee employment work, is that after that cookie dough job, because you speak 4 languages, you were recruited to be an interpreter. That's how many of our staff come to us as interpreters. But because you had already walked the walk, you knew how to navigate getting employment in Burlington. It brought you to a full-time employment counselor position with the resettlement agency there. But I love this twist. Tell us how you got to Lowell. How did you get the job in Lowell?
So I was in a refugee conference. I met with a coworker. Her name is Sherry. I don't want to call her lady while she is. She was telling me that she's from Vermont, and out of the line, and also she was very friendly, and also she was telling me that Lowell is a big city, very diverse, and they're looking for employment. That's how I connected. 6 years later, I'm in Lowell, doing the same role, supporting our clients to become successful in Lowell.
Sherry's our Sherry's our ESL program director up in Lowell, and she has been with the agency. I don't have her right here, but I think it's almost 2 decades. And she's just, when she says she drives around Lowell, she just sees her clients everywhere because of the diversity of the city, and she's been an amazing inspiration. I'm so glad she recruited you to come to Lowell. I could talk to you. I get the privilege of talking to you all the time, but this is particularly special to talk about your personal life. But again, Yusif, thank you. You and I both know that I would not be in this work if it were not for the fact that Somali refugees moved to my hometown in 2001. And although I wish they never had to be displaced, it's been a privilege to have a large Somali community and to meet someone like you in my life. So thank you. Thank you for sharing your story. All right, everybody. Thank you for those of you who have joined us tonight. I hope you've enjoyed these stories. I saw some love on the comments on YouTube. Keep them coming for the storytellers. I wish I could clap loudly. But also just thank you for being a Suitcase Stories supporter and a supporter of the International Institute and Global Arts Live. It means the world to us. If you're someone that would like to tell a story, we are always looking for new voices. You can contact us through suitcasestories.org. We've got lots of programs. We actually go into schools right now virtually and do programming with everyone from middle school up. We even do some elementary, but we also go into companies where we help companies do DEI programming and raise the voices of diversity within their businesses. And we do virtual shows like these, and it would not be possible without an amazing partner like Global Arts Live. So I'm going to welcome Maury back and to close out the evening.
Well, what a really warm evening of great storytelling. Thank you so much to the tellers, Cheryl. Thank you to the International Institute of New England for the great work that you do in this area. Especially during this time, as we heard just from Yusif's story. It's not easy. And, I think all of the people that are listening and have joined us tonight appreciate the work that the Institute does. And to the viewers that joined us, thank you so much. We really enjoyed having you with us. We hope, and I'm sure it's optimistic, that it is optimistic, and I mean, really, I feel very optimistic that the next time we partner with the International Institute of New England, we will be live and we will gather together as a community at the Somerville Theatre, where we have for the past 2 years. Please help support both organizations. Your generosity will help us get there. And you can make those contributions at globalartslive.org/suitcase stories. I feel that tonight it's a sort of snowy night, but I have a much warmer feeling. And Yusif's story is what a great reunion. I mean, what a great thing to come out and tell in this very challenging time for all of us.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, everyone. We look forward to seeing you in a year's time at the Somerville Theatre. Good night. Stay warm. Stay healthy.
Thanks, Warren.